Thanks a lot for being here. I hope everything is fine, is clear, and it works. So we open this session, this panel, which is titled "Heritage Beyond Walls." Heritage Beyond Walls is a name that we decided. When I say we, I mean the Fondazione Santagata, the Santagata Foundation for the Economics of Culture, in collaboration with Rome Museum Exhibition. We decided to have, because we believe it must be at the core of our work. It's about heritage, it's about walls, it's about the built heritage, the physical cultural heritage, but is also about something going beyond all this. We believe, and we know, we are aware, and we want to support the idea of cultural heritage as not just for its conservation, its valorization, whatever, but its social value, its role for peace, for democracy, for sustainable development. I would like to start this session by recalling briefly the sentence which is in the Constitutive Act of UNESCO, because it's the 75th anniversary of the creation of UNESCO, which says, since the war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defense of peace must be constructed. Of course, it's a big statement, it's a big challenge, but we really want this to be real for us, for our generation, for the future generations especially. So that's the scope of this panel, and I would like to say thank you and to introduce the invited speakers today. It's really a pleasure and a joy to have with us Zaki Aslan from ICCROM-Sharjah, Helen Marais from the UK Embassy in Rome, Matteo Rosati, UNESCO Regional Bureau for Culture and Science in Europe, Yara Moualla, University of Westminster, who is, I mean, all of you are friends, and I was saying that Yara is pretty much involved in this topic, and we will discover why and how. And Vanessa Fraga Prol, who is speaking from the Netherlands, from CER, the Center for Emergency Response of the Prince Claus Fund. So a warm thank you for your availability, for your support, and for sharing your experiences. I would like to manage and to moderate this session by proposing a few questions and try to learn from your experience and your view what you think about the topics that I'm proposing. And the first question is exactly the starting point, the point from which I was starting by opening this session, which is the role of culture into peace maintenance, into intercultural dialogue, into understanding the diversities, and into supporting the quality of life of people. And I would like to start these reflections starting from Zaki. Zaki, I would like you to say something about this from your privileged point of view in a region of the world which is extremely important and significant in relations also, unfortunately, of some still ongoing conflicts. So Zaki, if you can take the floor.
Thank you, Alessio, and thank you for the invitation. I was not sure how to unmute myself. I'm very pleased and honored to be with all of you and the honorable speakers. I perhaps should start by saying, having had some experiences in how culture can be a vector in peace building, but also in reconciliation, in addition to sustainable development. We recently had a project in Sudan, Western Sudan Community Museums, where we tried to see how we could develop these museums as hubs for people and parties who were in conflict in this part of Sudan, and whereby museums became a place where they meet and celebrate their shared cultural heritage. I'm starting with this tangible example to give an idea that this was a project funded, by the way, by the British Council, and we have some good results, because we always talk about community engagement, community participation, and how we could bring people together. So this has been a great experience for us in illustrating that this is possible. So the project, although it included conservation of historic buildings where these museums and collections are presented to the public, now we have changed this notion of museums to become museums, community museums, as cultural hubs, where, as I mentioned, the intangible heritage comes with the tangible conservation of building and collections. And here, maybe I should say, the intangible heritage played an important role, where in the spaces of these museums, there have been celebrations of heritage, ranging from folklore to cooking to dancing to music, all the elements that form the intangible cultural heritage of this particular region of this country. I wanted to start with this example to illustrate the possibilities and how we move from what is usually done by other organizations in the area of peace keeping to peacemaking, and how culture can play an important role in bringing people together, especially when they share the same heritage and the same inheritance that is important to their lives. So I want to start with that, Alessio, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it. I'm not sure if you hear me, by the way, so I'm so sorry about this new technology I'm not used to. Perhaps I want to invite the viewers and also the speakers to also visit our website, where we have also a movie about this project. The intangible heritage was recorded and in several films, ranging, in fact, there were above 50 films where they have been.
Okay, thank you, Zaki. I'm sorry, we have a little delay in managing technical questions, but we are trying to manage this. And you are proposing some points which are very at the core of the question that we would like really to understand all together, because the only way to approach such a challenging and delicate question is to try to work together. And that's the scope also of this little panel, but the scope of a number of initiatives that we really would like to pursue. on this, which are needing the contribution of different people, different institutions, different energies. And I was starting by mentioning the Constitutive Act of Unesco, and I'm very thankful for the presence today, as well as in many other occasions of Matteo Rosati. And I would like you to join the discussion on this point. So Matteo, if you can take the floor and propose your reflection on the role of culture and cultural heritage in making peace happen.
Unesco, and good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to all those attending online and to my fellow speakers in this panel. And thanks, of course, for the invitation to join you today. Unfortunately, online. I hope next time we really will have the opportunity to finally get out of this very complex situation with the pandemic. So, well, Alessio, in fact, you stole my opening statement by quoting the UNESCO Constitution, but you are very much right. UNESCO was established for this very purpose of building the defenses of peace in the minds, as the only UN organization and specialized agency with a mandate on education, culture, and the sciences. And on this basis, we still serve as the main international cooperation platform to advance conceptual, normative, but also operational standards in these domains, which of course also include the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions, and I mean past, present and future cultural expressions for peace and sustainable development. Now, besides official jargon and terminology, I like to think that our work consists very much of creating enabling conditions for people and communities to get to know each other, to respect each other, and to possibly advance a common agenda. And culture, of course, is at the very center of the stage in all this, as dialogue and culture simply cannot be separated. But at the same time, dialogue and culture are too important and too crucial for the future of the planet to be confined as a stand-alone issue. Now, these very days, the General Conference of UNESCO is approving the basic program and documents for the organization over the next 8 years, besides appointing the new Director General, which is going to be confirmed actually. And in this framework, two issues will be especially prominent when it comes to culture in our midterm strategy. The first one is the necessity to reinforce the intersectoral action, meaning reinforcing synergy between culture and other major programs of UNESCO, education to name one. And the second is the renewed and reinforced attention on the integration of culture within the sustainable development processes as both a driver and an enabler for progress across all dimensions of the Agenda 2030, environmental, social, economic, and of course, including the one related to international peace and security. I would not want to take more time in this first round of questions, but of course I'll be glad to discuss some of our activities in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Thanks a lot for sharing your points, and sorry for having stolen the sentence, but it's important for us. It's crucial to all of us to mention it again and again, not because it's just the sentence of the Constitution of UNESCO, but because it's true. It's what we need. It's the reason why I'm really convinced. When I say I refer to, to our team. We are convinced that we need to try to contribute, to do something, because democracy, development, sustainability, peace are very big and challenging words, but we want them to be real and possibly to happen not that far in the future. You use the word future, and yes, of course, it's pretty much about our next future. All this, of course, building peace, keeping peace, making people meet, making people know each other requires a huge effort from a number of people from many different realities, countries. And today in this little panel, we really wanted to have a little mix of point of views by people working in the field, having experience and working daily in this field. Very specialized. I mean, all of you are working in a very specialized way according to your institutions, but in the end, we suspect that we share a common goal. And I would like to invite and share her reflection, another friend of me, who is Vanessa. And Vanessa recently joined the CER, which is the Center for Emergency Response, recently founded by the Prince Claus Fund, which is an institution which has a very long experience in funding and supporting projects in also in conflicts, in areas facing conflicts. Vanessa, what do you think about the question that we are discussing right now? C'è bisogno di dare il microfono a Vanessa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alessio, for inviting me. As you said, I just joined the Cultural Emergency Response Program of the Prince Claus. And at the Prince Claus, we truly believe that culture is a basic need. So we work after a crisis situation, either because of conflict or disaster, and we try to put people at the center of our initiatives. So we work with local actors, with grassroots initiatives, and we try to support them in safeguarding the heritage that is important to them. Recently, we had a project also in collaboration with the British Council in Yemen, and it was the reconstruction of different mosques, domes, and shrines that were destroyed during conflict. And how we did that was supporting local architects that were using techniques, very ancient techniques, to work with earthen architecture, and at the same time they were strengthening the capacity of the professionals on the ground. As you know, the Cultural Emergency Response Program was created at the Prince Claus in 2003, and it was a direct reaction from the fund to the blowing up of the Babylon Buddhas, and then also the looting of the Iraqi museum. So we feel there was an important need to safeguard culture after crisis, well, or during crisis situations. So we think that working with local people is very important to make it also sustainable as you strengthen all the capacities that are already in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for sharing also your view and from your position, and good luck also for this new task that you are complying with. You touched another point which is significant and relevant in improving the condition of people, because the role of investing and working with cultural heritage in our countries, in our cities, is to provide opportunities for the people, professional opportunities as well, because with welfare, with well-being is is a precondition for preventing conflicts. So that's very relevant. And aside the technical questions and the technical work that all of us are doing in this field, we know that a great part of the value of the work of working with culture is about its capacity of mobilizing attention, energies. It's the so-called soft dimension, soft power of culture. It's a matter of politics, of policies, and of diplomacy. And I'm very happy that in our group today of discussion we have Helen Marais, who works for the UK Embassy here in Rome. We are speaking from Rome today with Helen. I was involved by Helen in a discussion similar to this one a few months ago, which was titled "Handling with Care." And I'm very pleased, Helen, you are with us today. I would like to involve you in this discussion about what could be the role of culture in supporting the building of peace.
Hi, Alessio. Can you hear me? Hello? Brilliant. Sorry, I'm not so used to VoiceBoxer as I am to other applications, and I first have to sort of beg your pardon. I'm actually currently at the Biennale di Venezia, La Finissage, the UK pavilion in our back office. I'm happy to say that the front exhibits are a little bit more glamorous than this part. This is obviously a massive part of our cultural heritage, as I'm sitting in this pavilion that was built more than 100 years ago. But it's been fascinating to hear of the interventions from colleagues. And I'm very pleased to hear about the collaboration with the British Council already on our projects in the Middle East. As you know, and as we share, as we are great supporters of UNESCO and cultural protection in general, we are extremely seized of the importance of protecting cultural heritage in areas of conflict, particularly those at risk of damage, but not just the physical heritage, but also the other areas of culture, such as music, artisanal crafts, these things that are really important to societies and communities that they've built up for years. So we have, for this reason, set up, we've committed £43 million since 2016 to work with a range of projects. The Cultural Protection Fund is run by the British Council, and this year's fund we will be distributing 2.4 million We've run a total of 51 projects so far across 12 countries, and we have 17 of those running until 2021. We've also, a new addition is to recognise the role of climate change in cultural protection as well as a new threat that often affects the same regions of the world where, because of conflict, people are particularly vulnerable, and as their heritage is particularly vulnerable as well. And that we have been mainstreaming through our interventions at the G20 Cultural Ministerial Conversation, and I'm sure some of you will have taken part in many of the workshops with the sector that were a part of that, and also I hope share our pleasure at the way that Italy has managed this and the communique that resulted. Just some examples of some of the things that we've been doing in the MENA region is very much focusing on the illicit trade of antiquities in Syria and Iraq as part of our sort of general counter-Daesh efforts, and applying sort of smart water codes to at-risk artifacts to present, to build resilience. Was also making full use of digital technology and the full range of new techniques across all methods of keeping records and managing data, which I know, Alessio, is something that you have very much been championing with your fantastic initiative in Syria. I think our main reflection would be that, as you know, we have been really thinking about cultural protection over the past year, that cultural protection is firstly for everybody. There is no sense that there is a hierarchy and that there is an order. That culture is for some people, not for others. And also, it's not in the past; it's actually our future. And what part of our efforts, particularly working in the Middle East, is to ensure that hopefully, when the conflict subsides, that those people will be able to recall their past in order to have a future. But I'm delighted to be here today, and Alessio has been such a fantastic partner for us in working on cultural protection that it's always a pleasure to be involved in his projects. But I'll leave it there because I know there are some excellent speakers coming after me, so I don't want to hog too much of the limelight.
Thank you, Helen. It's really important and a pleasure to have you together with us, and it's a pleasure having the possibility to have a dialogue with you on this, because we know how relevant, how difficult is also the question of approaching diversity, because we are really aiming to work by matching diversities, which are part of this world, luckily, of course, but at the same time we need a big effort, a constant daily effort to understand each other. And I know about your engagement in the countries, in some of the countries that you have just mentioned, and in many others. But you have mentioned also Syria, and yes, it's a pretty symbolic context, that one, because of the long-lasting 10 years of war, and because of a number of reasons which are making all of us extremely sad and embarrassed and willing to somehow do something to support, especially the people who are suffering this condition. And I have a number of friends from Syria. One of them is certainly Yara Moualla, who is working, studying, and developing research at the University of Westminster University, and who is extremely engaging into this as well. I would like you, Yara, to join the discussion. devo chiamare lei o c'è lei? Please, Yara, can you join the discussion? Yara, I'm saying this.
Hello. I think now I'm not muted anymore. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Alessio, for the very nice introduction and for gathering us today. I mean, with this distinguished speakers, I'm sure this will be a very thrilling and important session for all of us. I would take the chance and say that I'm happy to speak after Helen Marais, especially that I'm a scholar with the University of West of Scotland, where we do a lot of our research support for the British Council, and we were looking to find evidences to provide more funds for culture and heritage as a tool for peace. And lately we commissioned by the British Council to do this report about the role of cultural heritage in building stability and security, looking mainly at Rwanda, Colombia, and Syria. And from that, there was this publication, beautiful one from the British Council that I invite everyone to look at, which is Art for Peace. Going back to your to the topic that you opened, Alessio, about the possible impact of cultural heritage in building more stabilized and in communities and towards peace building or maintaining. I would say that let's go to the basics. I mean, as a researcher, I always go to the basics. I mean, usually conflict as an opposite of peace, and if we look at conflict, we look at two main important variables, which is misunderstanding and fear. And when we understand that concept that well, then I think we can find, we heritage specialists and practitioners, we can really find so many potentials in culture in general and heritage, in order to facilitate the process of maintaining peace or building up a culture that is against what I would like to call conflict or misunderstanding or that fear. You can really easily take that fear away from diverse communities. By that, I would suggest to look at culture and heritage as a process, and to look at the communities and the people as the main agents and the most important part, which will create a model for a heritage in action that imposes changes and changes towards the positive part, which is peace. And in my PhD research, I have worked closely and in a very detailed way on a way to track a pathway to change, where communities and heritage practitioners together in a heritage, I would call avenues, can interact, can construct more values, take it from the past, and create their contemporary values in order to create a new realities that has its own values and suggest its own practices. So here we talk about the soft power of cultural heritage in terms of bringing people to exchange and get to know each other, exchange their values, and then suggest the practices. I don't want to speak much about the process, but it is a specific scientific process where you can put heritage in action for the culture of peace. And yeah, I mean, I will leave then the floor for the rest, and I hope that the other questions can make me speak a little bit further in that sense.
Thank you, Yara, for pushing us, for recalling us to the importance of taking action. That's true. That's absolutely what we need to do, and be aware on how to do and why we do work with with cultural heritage. And I would like to go for a sort of second round of comments from your experience. And I would like to start this second round by Matteo, because yes, Yara was recalling us to the importance of mobilizing energies, and UNESCO certainly is the most important agency and global instrument, if I may say it, at the international scale, the global scale, for working, addressing questions related to culture and cultural heritage through a number of programs, starting from the most popular one, famous one, which is the World Heritage Convention, of course. So my question to Matteo is how to concretely, really, mobilize energies, starting from the communities which are already involved into UNESCO programs. That would be that would have an incredible value, but I personally feel, from my point of view, from my experience, that it still need a strong push for mobilizing energies towards the goals of making progress happen, making sustainability happen. What's your view on this, Matteo?
Thank you again, Alessio. Well, how to put it? I'm sure, and you mentioned that already, that you all know that UNESCO's action in the field of culture is very much based on a set of normative instruments, starting with the 6 main cultural conventions, which are the fundamental and leading international normative instruments in the field of culture. Let me mention, of course, the World Heritage Convention, but also more recent instruments, such as the groundbreaking Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage and the only known heritage convention, the 2005 one, on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expression. Hence, our concrete experiences and activities in fostering cultural diversity for dialogue and development are primarily linked to our work to support and monitor the implementation of such instruments. And we do so by providing capacity building support to the advancement of normative and of policy frameworks. Now, this is to say about our domains or fields of action when it comes to culture. But in terms of methodology, how to do things, now, my personal experience clearly shows 2 things. First of all, that the widest impact on dialogue and understanding is reached very simply when activities include a networking component or are focused primarily on networking and multi-stakeholder partnership building. This is demonstrated, for example, in our work in Southeast Europe at the Culture Unit of the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Europe, where I work, where we give priority whenever possible to supporting networks at all levels, from ministers of culture to public and private practitioners to communities and groups. There is no dialogue, as I was saying, without encounter, and creating conditions for fruitful encounters is, again, a necessary component in a dialogue building and confidence building process. Secondly, we work to raise awareness and to advocate, using also the symbolic value of UNESCO for the role of culture for peace and development, but also to provide people, and I mean people in a very comprehensive sense, again, including practitioners, communities and networks, provide them with knowledge, with skills, with tools to improve the appreciation of cultural diversity and its value in terms of sustainable development. This is a kind of work that requires a very dynamic and innovative approach, or I would say approaches in the plural, and also a transdisciplinary action, because it cannot be dealt with within the limits of any specialized discipline. And of course, if we have more time, I'll be glad to also tell you about some more recent experiences we are having with specific activities which are a bit out of the ordinary UNESCO's action and program.
You were underlying the importance of building partnerships and building networks, real ones, and I know this is some of the most important, I would say, part of the work that also you, Zaki, are doing from your office in Sharjah, because your office has a particular mandate on the Arab countries, and we know, I believe, that aggregating those different actors in an area of the world which is pretty difficult from this point of view is really demanding, but is really necessary. I would like to ask you if you can share some of your experience in how to creating the conditions for making this relationship happen from an area of the world which is particularly stressed by relationships by different countries, communities, and cultures. So, Zaki, if you can share with us some reflection on this point.
Thank you, Alessio. I think I would start by again looking at what we have been doing in the past few years in this area. I would like to use perhaps some key aspects of the work that we have been doing, especially related to education. As you know, like when we talk about, we have been developing approaches in this area for real world projects, but at the same time educating people, initiating dialogue with the communities also is at the core of what we have been doing in the past few years. All the conservation projects that we have been working on, including the one, for example, that we also are developing together with UNESCO in Mosul for capacity building of people, we look at this idea of rebuilding cultural heritage in all its physical aspects, but in a broader sense. That's why we look at the term recovery, or the notion of recovery, because it encompasses also communities and people in the process. So I think this is really essential, even by way of doing training of specialists. We need to really look at this issue in a very holistic manner and try to embed that also in the training and the capacity building work that we are doing. Of course, we are also addressing the youth who are the future in any community, and I think that requires also certain ways and techniques by which we can work on these projects. So what I want to say here is that because our work involves a lot of capacity building work, building capacity of people, we look at capacity building in a more broader sense. We look at it in such a way that we have people who are specialized in this particular area to become not only knowledgeable of how to manage historic buildings and areas or collections in museums, but also how to develop communication skills and establish dialogue with a diverse audience and diverse parties involved in the conflict. So this is really at the essence of what we have been doing. We have been trying also to translate this into methodologies that we have been publishing in the past few years, including how to analyze the conflict, how we train these people to develop peace building work, and how they can work with communities, closely with communities. Because we have been talking about this for many years now, how we can engage communities, and the essence of having what we call people-centered approaches in our work in the conservation field. But I think when it comes to real-world situations, we need to be aware that this is not really, there is no one formula first, but there is but still there is a kind of methodology that we can try to instill in everybody's engagement in the training work that we do, so that they can take this forward as agents and communicators, and how they can manage this kind of situations in a very broader and holistic approach. I think at the essence of this is also how they can themselves also build partnerships with other organizations and institutions, even at the local level, and how they can work. I think one of the colleagues mentioned the intersectorial approach that is also needed, in the sense that we work hand in hand as cultural specialists with education specialists, and how we could also integrate, the work that we do on the ground in that sense. I'll go back to the Sudan, perhaps example, where there were 4 components with this British-funded project: conservation of buildings, management of collections, and conservation of collections, which are mainly ethnographic collections in these community museums. The communities also donate these objects to the museum, so they are part of this engagement in protecting their own heritage. But more than that, there are also the educational, the third component, which is education, and how we can help those who are responsible for these museums to go beyond the walls. And we are now addressing this in this seminar. We talk about also beyond the walls of the museums themselves, whereby the museums become, the places of or meeting points, if you want, where communities come, celebrate their heritage, learn more about their past and their heritage, and plan accordingly for the future. So this is really, in a very brief manner, I can describe the work that we have been doing from ICCROM-Sharjah office here to serve the region, and I want to really highlight the fact that building the capacity has been developed in a certain way, that we're not talking only about training, but also we're talking about a kind of a paradigm shift, if you want, in the way we do capacity building of specialists and institutions, in particular in this part of the world.
That's all very important, and thank you for underlying these aspects and sharing this experience that you are carrying on you with your institution, of course, and talking about this area of the world, not because it's the only one facing conflict, because when we talk about peace, we talk about all the countries, including the ones which fortunately are not affected by wars or disaster, but in which it's still important to prevent and to support the peace process, all the aspects that we are discussing today, right now. But speaking about conflicts and areas which are severely affected by stress, of course we are. I mean, I was, as all of us, probably shocked by looking on what recently is happening, is still happening in Afghanistan. And I know that, Helen, you have a very close experience with that country, and I know that it's pretty pretentious to talk about it in this moment. But I really would like you to join again our discussion with a feeling, at least, on what would be what would we expect to happen in that country in the following periods, and how we can again, I don't want to be pretentious, how we can try to understand what is going to happen there, especially in relation to the people and its culture.
Yes, Alessio, thank you for raising that in my heart, as I was posted to Afghanistan for a bit over a year in 2016-2017. I think most of us have been quite alarmed by the speed of what's happened since July, and particularly the terrible scenes we saw. I think it's hard for us to compute exactly what's going to happen next. I think perhaps our best indicator is what's happened in Syria, in terms of the extent of how that affects communities, the heritage that they preserve, and then of course the physical artefacts. What I can say is that partly because of the conflict and because of the events of 2001, the general perception of Afghanistan is very much dominated. What strikes you as a visitor diplomat, and I'm sure there are other people listening to this and other people on the panel who have been there, is how much those events and the conflict eclipses the sheer diversity of art and heritage and culture in Afghanistan, and particularly with reference to traditional crafts, clothes, the different styles of carpet, which are sort of incredible in their diversity. Seems to sort of be less in our minds, and that is something that's very important to preserve. The role of women as well is a really, really powerful reminder of culture and politics and what happens when things that are really traditions or customs can become hijacked and distorted. And one of the things that's really striking about this is, for example, in the traditional costumes worn by women that was so diverse, as there are lots of different regions, as there are in Italy with lots of different backgrounds and histories. And I think that is something that on the one side does seem to have endured, and there is that memory, but I think that's one of the things that is most sort of vital and would be most difficult, because over time what the worst fate is if people forget these rather sort of treasured aspects of their traditional cultures, because they're no longer able to celebrate them in the same way. But I also think what's really interesting is how much initiative and how enduring some of these things are, as I said, that I think they will sustain. I think the other thing that's very interesting from a heritage preservation perspective is that now, certainly when I was in Afghanistan, what you got quite a lot was people preserving and sharing photographs from the 70s. And this is when Afghanistan was on, you know, something that we referred to in the UK as the hippie trail. This is a free period. And I remember sort of the young Afghan women actually looking at photos of their mother's generation, sort of layers and layers of heritage there, which included, just by cars, that the ambassador, Dominic Jeremy, when I was there, had personally visited the Buddhas, the Bamyan Buddhas, and had photos of them before they were blown up. So it's interesting how heritage is carried with lots of people, and actually more people than you probably think can sort of bear witness to what was there before. But it is something that I know the British government are working on quite quickly. They've learnt from what's happened in the Middle East and the other conflicts, and those things are already being built into the programmes and the funds that I referred to earlier. And thanks to our many colleagues in situ in the Middle East, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, who and shown us what they feel should be preserved and how we should do this. I am optimistic about. But hopefully it won't be of long duration for the Afghan people.
It's very deep. Thank you for your deep. For sharing your personal experience, and I think we need personal. We need to know from personal. Stories, experiences, because otherwise it's pretty easy to fall into rhetorics. But I'm very grateful to you all for sharing your view, your experience, your stories. I like this one, and thank you for your optimism as well. Vanessa, I would like to ask you. This question. So, in facing all this, the role of international cooperation is certainly difficult, sometimes very difficult, rather impossible, but it is one of the only instruments that we do have to use. I'm curious to know what are the programs of CER, of the Center for Emergency Responses, for the very next months and year. Are there some particularly area of work or geographical area in which you are gonna plan your activities? Is there a sort of list of priorities from an organization like yours? If so, what are them? Vanessa.
Thank you again for that question, Alessio. So, as I mentioned, the Cultural Emergency Response Program works in crisis situation. And so for that, we don't have priorities because we never know where the crisis is going to strike. We try to work with communities that are the most vulnerable, either to disaster or to conflict. And how we do that? We started 17 years ago. We developed with ICCROM, I will show, a handbook and toolkit for first aid to cultural heritage in time of crisis. So what we do, we train people locally so they can react when there is a crisis, because we realize that we have to strengthen all the capacity in times of peace or before the crisis strikes. And I want to also share the same concept that Mr. Rosati and Mr. Zaki talk about, and is developing a network. So we have, we have trained all the people in these very prone areas for conflict, or that we believe that climate change hazards will affect them. Then we create networks. How we do that? We have developed with the Smithsonian another course that is the leadership course, where people can connect, can share experiences, and can understand also how they have to work all the levels. So not only from bottom up, because we work with local actors, so of course everyone in the society has to be involved, but also how they have to connect with the civil protection sector. So all the people that will be giving a response to a crisis situation. And because we can never predict where a crisis is going to happen, we always try to prepare people in advance and have mechanisms ready so they can act as quickly as possible. We are now developing as well hubs. So we are trying to decentralize what we do here in Amsterdam to the areas. We have at the moment 2 hubs. One is in Central America because it's very prone to disasters. And there we have a center that is specialized in taking care of cultural heritage that has been damaged. And another part is the Western Balkan. So after the conflict, we realized that it was very important to also bring different countries together. So we have a hub with 3 different countries, so Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kosovo, and they are working together to also support cultural heritage activities. And it was very successful to have created this, because then in 2019 there was an earthquake in Albania, and they could react very quickly and save some landmarks that had many cracks, and the government thought it was better to destroy, but their architects there gave solutions that were not costly, and they managed to protect them. So this is actually how we work. Getting ready in the event that there is a crisis.
Getting ready, we must be prepared, for sure. That's extremely important. I'm thankful to you all, because I'm taking a lot of notes from your words. And we titled this little panel of discussion choosing this title, Heritage Beyond Walls. And this is the title that we gave starting from last year, from an initiative which is promoted by our foundation, together with a number of other partners. Some of you are aware of this initiative, and I hope some of you, if not all of you, would be involved or available to be involved in the next future. And this is a little project titled Heritage Beyond Walls, aiming at supporting students in cultural heritage disciplines from Syrian universities, with the scope of somehow breaking the walls, breaking the ice, breaking the isolation, or contributing somehow to create a break and to provide access to resources, to data, to information related to cultural heritage, because we really believe that cultural heritage is at the core of any recovery process. It's a resource, and for making this be used as a resource, we all need to be prepared, ready to somehow overpass the crisis. And I would like to join me in launching the second edition of this initiative, which is absolutely a not-for-profit initiative, self-financed by us and a number of friends. I would like Yara, who was and still is part of the team promoting this initiative, to briefly share some comments and considerations, some reflection about what is needed to do, especially in trying to involve and address the students, the next generation, as some of you already stressed. Yara.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Alessio, again. To be frank, like the whole idea of Heritage Beyond Walls started from talking a lot with students, with young professionals in Syria, after almost 10 years of isolation. Whoever stayed in the country and never touched base somehow, talking specifically here about the community of students and university students, not getting in touch with any new concepts or new trends in terms of what is cultural heritage, how can we mobilize it, what are the ways to manage it. At the same time, they were also surprising us, young professionals, with a lot of initiatives and a little work that was socially engaged and that had a big impact coming from Syria. And that's how I think the idea, talking to Alessio, we were discussing all that, the whole idea of Heritage Beyond the Walls has been created as a responsive to the specific need of the Syrians feeling this isolation due to the sanctions, due to the conflict, due to everything. There was this cut, and we thought that, yes, heritage can combine everyone, even those who are left in the past, if we talk about heritage as, and archaeology. So why not also that heritage can break these walls of isolation, and we can talk one-to-one with Syrian students, young professionals who are trying to make sense of their existence on daily basis during this difficult time, and also listen to their stories, and at the same time have the chance to introduce for them what's happening and open a kind of a discussion, directly or indirectly, in terms of the projects that they were proposing to us at the end. And they were surprised, like from the last year, how much work has been done, and majority of the projects, at least it has some sort of foundation that it happened at a specific moment in Syria, or at least they're wishing to realize it. So engaging with these young professionals, I think and students helped us a lot in that sense. If I want to share my experience in the last year, and how much there is a request for the second edition of Heritage Beyond Walls, which we are we are launching today. Alessio, back to you.
That's very true. And with this initiative, we involved last year a pretty high number, let's say almost more than 70 students coming from the universities of Syria, from the most important cities, all the most important cities in the country. We gave access to talks, to materials, to lectures, and a little award, a little prize. I remember two prizes from proposal coming from Damascus, one from Aleppo, and one was about an intangible cultural heritage tradition. Even during the Rome Museum exhibition 2 days ago, we gave a prize to a proposal coming from Aleppo as well. In other words, we try really to care and to pay attention to what is happening there, because it's related to us as well, not just to the people living there. That's the meaning of culture, belonging to everyone, and towards which everyone we feel responsible. The keyword of Heritage Beyond Walls, so the title of this panel and of this project that we carry on, the keyword is beyond to me, which means beyond the walls, beyond the stones, beyond the conservation and the protection of the stones, which means beyond the categories, beyond the differences that are present, of course, between different people, but we are proud of our diversity, beyond the walls that we have in our minds, especially, which are the cause of any kind of conflicts, and beyond the present dimension, because we really want to look to the future, not just to the past. Of course, heritage comes from the past, but especially I believe that heritage is about the future, our future. And I'm very grateful to you all. We were taking a lot of notes, a lot of key concepts that we really want to take profit from in planning new initiatives on this field because it's really getting more and more at the core of our work. The call for the 22 edition of Heritage Beyond Walls is launched, and we will make it circulate in the following days. But especially, let me conclude this session by saying a very sincere thank you for the work you do, for the passion that is clear every time I talk with all of you, and especially for your friendship. Thank you, and I hope to meet and talk to all of you very soon. Goodbye. Ciao.